Kripto서울, and welcome back to the Erica Show. For those of you who are new to the show, the Erica Show introduces influential builders in the blockchain space. 안녕하세요. 크립토서울 에리카입니다. 에리카쇼는 블록체인 업계의 다양한 분들과 인터뷰를 하고 공유하고 있습니다. 이번 게스트는 프라이버시 쪽 프로젝트 중에서 Zcoin으로 알려졌던 최근에 Firo로 리브랜딩을 하고 메인넷 발표까지 한 Firo 대표님인 Reuben님을 모셨습니다. In our 13th episode, today's guest is Reuben Yap, who is the co-founder and CEO of Firo. Reuben, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me on, Erica. And 안녕하세요, is that the right way to say it?
Yes, 안녕하세요. Yes, you're good. Welcome to the show, and thank you for taking your time. And I'm sure it's a busy time for the team and for you as well, due to the entire rebranding.
Pretty interesting times, yeah.
I'm sure, and we'll get more of that in a later show. But for viewers who are not familiar with you or what you do, can you please give a brief introduction of who you are and share with us what you're currently working on at the moment?
Right. So my name is Reuben. I am actually the project steward of the project because, as a decentralized project, we aren't supposed to have CEOs.
Sorry.
But, no. But I have been in the cryptocurrency scene since about 2013. I was actually one of the earliest merchants to accept Bitcoin in Malaysia. Oh. And I actually come from a legal background. So prior to actually assuming this role at Firo, I was actually a lawyer for 10 years.
Wow.
And after that, of course, I also founded a VPN company, which is all about privacy. So I was kind of introduced to cryptocurrencies because people were looking for more private ways to pay for the service. And that's kind of how I got into, first Bitcoin, then it was then considered anonymous, and then later on Dash, Monero, and then finally Zcoin, and then Zcoin Firo, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's like a natural evolution. I guess I've been in the privacy space since like 2007. And right now, of course, I'm kind of like leading or steering the project Firo, and we're really working on pushing on the release of our new Lelantus privacy protocol, which is pretty groundbreaking, and I guess we'll cover more on that later. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So you're the project steward. That's a good title to have, actually. Yeah, I really like that. So you said you were in a legal background before, so that's very interesting. And has that affected your interest in privacy at all? Because you said you also founded a VPN company as well.
Right.
But how did that, I'm very curious how that transitioned into the privacy space.
So what's happening with privacy coins now, with all the delistings and bans, so it's actually very similar to what I experienced when we were starting the VPN company. Mm-hmm. Because, now VPNs, everyone uses VPNs. It's kind of like, it's like, oh yeah, it's like an antivirus, right? But, it's protecting your internet connection or hiding your privacy details. But then it was actually considered high risk. And what actually happened was many payment processors cut me off. They said that we're not comfortable in processing payments for VPN services. They're like, You guys are high risk. And I'm like, why? I'm just like encrypting traffic, right? Yes. And similarly, even PayPal kept on shutting down my account and then reactivating after I explained what it did. And this happened like 2 or 3 times. Mm. So that's kind of how I went into, and the one of the reasons why I also founded the VPN company was my country started censoring the internet. At first, it was a bit innocuous. They were like, okay, let's ban pornography sites. Mm. And then okay, then let's ban P2P. And then after that, the censorship started growing, and then they banned medium.com because there was a critical article about the government, and then they're like, let's just censor the whole medium.com. And that actually really highlighted what may start off as innocent or like fighting illicit activity easily leads into what I consider government overreach, right? I mean, why can't I read medium.com just because of one blog article or like a one publication that is not talking about the government in a positive light? So that's just kind of how I got into the privacy space, and then I kind of like felt the weight of like, banks and credit card processors just shutting me off for no good reason and subjecting me to so many queries. And I was like, look, I'm not doing an illegal business. I just want to protect people's privacy, right? Or even access medium.com or like, stuff like that. And because of that, I was really interested in privacy coins, because it just, although I was told to accept Bitcoin because it was anonymous, I quickly realized that actually, Bitcoin's kind of like Twitter for your bank account, right? And that's how I got into at first Dash and then Monero. And then when Zcoin kind of started in 2016, I was like, oh, I'm really interested in being a part of a project. And that's kind of how I just joined as, one of the first, I think it's the first employee of Zcoin, and slowly assume the role that I do today. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very long trajectory, and you basically touched upon Dash, Monero, like all the privacy projects, and then you ended up in Zcoin/Firo. And
yes.
what kind of like stood out, like what made you stick to the Firo project as you're currently doing right now? Yeah.
Well, I mean, Dash used to be called Coin, and they started out as one of the first privacy coins, right? And Monero, I think, was around the same time-ish. And Dash was all about like, getting groups of people to come together and kind of like mixing their fun, kind of like, like Mahjong. You move all the tiles together, mix it, and then you take back the tiles, right? That's how CoinJoin works, right? Monero is kind of similar, where you don't have to actively participate, but it's still a kind of mixing where you're taking other people's transactions and using them as decoys, right? But Zcoin then was the first privacy coin that uses a burn and redeem mechanism. And the idea behind that is that I could take a coin, destroy them, and then redeem them for brand new coins with no previous transaction history at any time in the future. And that was a lot more attractive to me, because it didn't feel like, oh, I'm just hiding it in a bunch of noise, right? Like it's kind of like when I'm putting footprints in, like I'm trying to hide my footprints in the sand by putting a lot of footprints. Here it's almost like the wave washes over it and just makes the footprints disappear. And that really attracted me to Zcoin, that was using the Zero Coin protocol then. And I found it really innovative, and I was just like really excited to be a part of this new wave of privacy technology.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. I understood straight away what you meant about that. And I'm pretty new to the privacy space, to be honest. Like I've been meaning to, delve into it. And, you're the first one in the privacy space to be interviewed here. So I'm very, excited to hear more. And, it's just back to the fundamentals, right? So what is privacy? And I think we hear privacy so much in the blockchain space, but we didn't really, like take a very, because like this year has been mostly like DeFi, and there were like these keywords, but privacy has always been there, right? Always been there. I think it's been one of the main, main topics.
Right.
And what do you think privacy means, and why do you think we should care about privacy? Like, just a fundamental description in your interpretation.
Sure. Basically, on a very high level, we don't want people to know what we are doing with our money, right? If we believe that cryptocurrency is money or some sort of store of value, when I go into, let's say I pay someone with, let's say if I have a wallet with 100 Bitcoin in it, an address with 100 Bitcoin in it, and I just want to buy some coffee from you, and I transfer 0.001 or whatever that's worth, right? Immediately, the person that receives that 0.001 can tell that I have 100 Bitcoin at least, because they saw the source, right? And that's the most basic. And they're like, why am I buying a cup of coffee? Why should I give information about myself, about my net worth, about my potential holdings? And if they trace back, they maybe even find out like, okay, how much I get paid, or where did I get this from, or even how much I pay my suppliers or employees, right? If I actually want to use cryptocurrency, not just as speculation, but as a real means of medium of transfer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the idea is that you have to realize that unlike in banking where, I can go and say, hey, Erica, let me check your bank account. Bitcoin is kind of designed like that in the sense that, yes, there's no like name attached to the address, but nowadays there are publicly available tools that even researchers can say, all right, all of this is tied to one person. Mm-hmm. And it becomes, if researchers can do that, companies can do even more. Mm. And if we kind of imagine a world where cryptocurrencies are mainstream, who would use a payment system that exposes so much information about yourself? Like, I mean, some people don't even show their wives how much net worth they have, right? And what more? Yeah. What more the whole world, right? So I would say that financial privacy is, well, I would say it's a fundamental right that's actually recognized in law. I mean, like, you see all these banking privacy acts. If you believe cryptocurrency is supposed to be money or some sort of store of value, then privacy is definitely really important. And if you want to go like back into like sort of the roots of cryptocurrency, which was supposed to be an alternative financial system, which is uncensorable, mm-hmm. unseizable, and decentralized. Mm-hmm. And the things that you can't have unseizable, like uncensorability, if you don't have privacy, or because you might talk on a technical level, oh yeah, miners cannot censor transactions that easily because there's always another miner processing. But you have to think that if I know that, okay, this address has 100 Bitcoin in it, I'm not going to use any technical way. I just go to your house and like put a spanner at your head and I'm like, give me that money, right?
Yeah.
That is seizable as well. Well, if all the transactions were hidden, the balances were hidden, and the traces of that, it should emulate like cash, right? Where when you're transacting with it, you're not giving any additional information about yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think this is especially true when you're talking about the rise of CBDCs, like central bank digital currencies, right? And now they're trying to do away with physical cash and stuff like that. And people say, oh yeah, it's so convenient and stuff like that. But it also means that you are surrendering a lot of control. Not to say that we're anti-government, but you're giving a lot of power to the government. Yeah. And governments often go bad. And the more power that you give them, the more often that they will abuse them. And they, like Germany still loves their cash despite being such an advanced country, but they're like, we believe in the importance of cash because they see it as a balance of power between the citizen and the state. And if just imagine a government that can say, I don't like what you're talking to me, I cut you off from the financial system. You can't really do that with cash, but you can do that with, let's say, like a CBDC, right? Yeah, mm-hmm. I can trace wherever you're doing. So I do think that, that's what I mean, that why we need like financial privacy on the blockchain, if we believe that cryptocurrency is not just speculation and should be a really like a medium or means of transfer and a store of value. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I believe that there's like many kinds of privacy, right?
Right. Yes.
And what kind of privacy is Firo focusing to solve? Like, for example, there's like data privacy, enterprise privacy, internet privacy. That's what I believe, and so forth. And as you mentioned right. as well, financial privacy. So what is Firo trying to focus on at this moment?
We're just basically focusing on privacy on the blockchain, both on the on-chain layer and also on the network layer. Because I mean, on the blockchain, of course, there's stuff that's recorded permanently on the blockchain that everyone can see. Obviously, that has to be protected, right? Yes. So that we want to protect what we call sender privacy, receiver privacy, and also amount privacy. You want to hide the source of the funds. You want to be able to post an address without people looking up the address and say, oh yeah, how much this person has received. That's receiver privacy. And there's also amount privacy. You want to hide how much is being transferred. And then you would have the network layer privacy, where you want to prevent a transaction being associated with a particular IP address, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess we are seeing cryptocurrency as like an entire payment system, and we're trying to make sure that there's minimal leakage of information of, whether it be on chain or on the network layer or some other metadata. So I think privacy often is, just saying, oh yeah, it's privacy, but there are many different components to it. And if you don't protect one of them, like, for example, yeah, I can protect, the sender receiver privacy, but if I can tie that transaction to an IP address, I can immediately say, yeah, this came from you. and that kind of does away with all the on-chain privacy as well. So I think it's all encompassing there.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Let's kind of like do a proper introduction of Firo, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, sure.
and I heard, previously when it was called Zcoin, it started from the academia. Is that right? And then
Right.
Yeah, and it started before Zcash, right? Is that
Yes,
also
that's
true?
right.
Yes.
Mhm.
And adding on to that, can you also give a brief introduction of what Firo is?
Right. So, I mean, Firo was formerly known as Zcoin. We just rebranded, I think, like on the 30th of November. So it's a very recent rebrand. I guess we're more widely known as Zcoin currently.
Mm-hmm.
And why it was called Zcoin was that the first privacy protocol that we used was called Zerocoin.
Yes.
And Zerocoin was one of the first kind of like privacy protocols that use zero knowledge proofs. And later on, it was a new protocol, was kind of developed with the same authors, but different cryptography. And that was a zero cache paper that was used in the Zcash paper.
I saw both papers. Sorry.
Right. So actually, although they share some common authors like Ian Mears, Matthew Green, and Christina Garman, the cryptography behind it is completely different. The ideas behind it are similar, but they are very different cryptographic systems. And I guess it's beyond the scope of this to go into the nitty-gritty of why they are different. But so Zerocoin was an earlier protocol. Zerocash was a newer protocol with more experimental bits, with some elements of trust, like a trusted setup. But we started with the Zerocoin protocol. And we then moved to something called Sigma, which was an implementation of a different protocol called one of many proofs. Mm-hmm. And that allowed us to have the same functionality as Zerocoin, but we removed the requirement of trusted setup. And we also actually made it a lot more scalable. Like the original Zerocoin, like each transaction was 25 kilobytes, which is really large. And Sigma kind of brought it down to 1.5 kilobytes, which is a lot better. Mm. And then Lelantus, which is it's already we have our binaries now. It's going to be launched on the 12th or 13th of January. And that will actually improves on the Sigma protocol and further expands the ability of Sigma. But I don't know whether we should go into it now. But I guess on a very high level is that Lelantus, and we've been continuously doing research, and it's not just like someone implements, we copy. This is actually independent research that Firo does, and we're actually contributing towards the privacy technology in blockchain as a whole. And in fact, the Lelantus protocol has been used as inspiration for something called Triptych, which is one of Monero's upcoming privacy protocols, which they are thinking of using. So that was like, that's a huge innovation there. And Beam is also using a modified version of our technology called Lelantus, Mimber, Wimber. So it is actually gaining a lot of traction. Our work, not just on the coding side or the cryptocurrency or the token side, it's actually even in the research and technology side. Yeah.
That's great. Could you describe a little bit more about what the technology, like how it's different from, the traditional like Snark or Starks and, and so forth? Yeah.
Sure. So the problem with ZK Snarks, and especially as implemented in Zcash, is mainly two things. One is the requirement of trusted setup, and the other being that it is using very, very new cryptography that has cryptographic assumptions that hasn't really stood the test of time. So let's talk about trusted setup first. And trusted setup is basically a requirement when you're setting up the thing, when you're setting up the privacy protocol. You need to generate certain initial parameters and then destroy them. If you do not destroy them completely, if you do not destroy them properly, anyone who has that information can actually create coins out of thin air in an undetectable manner. So basically it has a money printing machine, it's almost like a backdoor. And that's, so the initial Zcash ceremony was only like 6 people, and they say, oh yeah, definitely they shouldn't be compromised, because, as long as one of them destroyed, it would be safe. But actually the initial ceremony was flawed. There was an potential inflation bug in the first the Sprout implementation. And they think that no one has exploited it because it's too complicated, which is kind of like security through obscurity, right? So it kind of illustrates the problems that, first of all, it's not easy to get right. It is not desirable to have trusted setup. And a way that I kind of like give an analogy is kind of like with Lord of the Rings, you have all these rings of power, right? Every one of the elves has the ring, the humans have the ring, but there's this one ring that can control them all. So you better destroy the one ring, or else, you have dominion over the others. It's kind of like that. I mean, a very rough analogy, but it's an easy way to see. You need to destroy the one ring, but if you have the one ring somewhere kept behind, that is a potential big backdoor. And in a decentralized system, like a decentralized cryptocurrency, the whole idea of having the trusted setup is not good. It's always about don't trust, verify, right? I mean, that's one of the things in blockchain that we talk about. Yes. And the second thing is the usage of very new cryptographic primitives, such as curve pairings and what they call a KA assumptions, the knowledge of exponent or something like that. So the idea is that the cryptography is not only very complex that only a few people in the world understand, it is also very new. And while this is promising, it is also quite risky, because if anything breaks, there's a huge potential there, right? And the fact that only a few people in the world understand it on a very deep level is a problem in itself, because how do you verify if only a few people in the world verify? Yes, it's open source, but it's like alien language to the vast majority of people. So what we were trying to do at Firo was basically create the privacy protocol that had very high anonymity, not like just like, for example, Monero is like anonymity set of mixing with 10 or 11 other transactions. So with Lelantus, that pool of anonymity is up like 64,000 or more, right? So it's several magnitudes larger. And we want to achieve this without trusted setup and without using any sort of fancy new cryptographic primitives. We're using cryptography that has lasted like 20 plus years, the basic cryptographic building blocks. And we feel that, there needs to be different options. There aren't that many blockchain privacy options right now. There's CoinJoin and its variants. There is Ring CT, which is what's used in Monero, and there is Mimblewimble, and there's like ZK Snarks. And that's it. And us, right? Like Zcoin, Zerocoin, Lelantus. There aren't that many, and none of them are perfect. Even ours is not perfect, but we feel that what we have created it covers all the bases very well. High anonymity, decent performance, no trusted setup. It ticks a lot of boxes. So and we feel that we want to offer long-lasting privacy, because in blockchain, remember, the history is permanent. It has to last not just today, but 10 years into the future or something like that. And even as blockchain analysis companies get better and better and computing power gets better and better. So we're very mindful of that, and that's why we think that stuff that we're building is really, really important.
Yeah, that's a great introduction, and a lot of people are interested in Firo, but I think the lack of information, like the rebranding story, was a little bit new, right? We'll talk more about that a little bit later, but as you mentioned, you said it ticks off a lot of the boxes, right? And for Lelantus, but like there is some sort of a trade-off, right, among these different sources of tech, such as like proving time, verifying time, proof size, etc.
Yes, right.
What did Firo choose to take and not take, right? I mean, you said it's not perfect, but like what are you concentrating more on, and why did you decide to like take that trade-off choice, I guess? Do you
I guess it's our approach is quite balanced in the sense that yes, the proof sizes are larger than a regular Bitcoin transaction. Like I think a Bitcoin transaction can be like 50 to 100 bytes, and we are like 1.5 kilobytes. So that's already a trade-off there, right? If you don't want transparent transactions, the proof sizes have to be larger. But personally, to me, I don't think with the rate of this space growing and like faster and faster SSDs, space on the blockchain is not really that a big concern. I mean, I'm not even talking about 1 terabyte blocks, but I think we can deal with a couple of even to say thousands of kilobytes of 1.5 kilobytes. It's not a huge amount. The other thing that is a bit of a trade-off is that as you said, verification time, and verification time for Lelantus proofs are actually quite competitive. Is that although the verification time is how much time it takes for a node to check that this transaction is valid, that this zero knowledge proof is valid. And one of the things that that Lelantus is a single proof takes very long to verify. It takes about, like worst case scenario, about 800 milliseconds, which is almost a second, which is really bad. But because we use other batch verification technologies, so what happens is that, okay, we verify one is 800 ms, but if we verify others, that means we add on, each additional proof only takes about 10 to 15 milliseconds. So it's like a huge upfront fixed cost, but any proof after that becomes very, very quick. So it's like, it's not a big problem. Like,
I see.
Yeah, a huge upfront cost, but after that, it becomes really, really scalable. While something like Zcash takes about 8 to 10 milliseconds across the board, but it's not bad. It's still very competitive. Monero has around similar verification times. The only drawback that we have is that first fixed large verification cost. So, and we cannot increase the anonymity set to, let's say, like 1 million or 2 million because the verification time gets too long. So that's why we picked a set of like 64,000 or so, or something like that. So yeah, I mean, those are some of the trade-offs that we're looking at. I mean, there is some impact on scalability, but I feel that even at current levels of Bitcoin adoption, the tech is scalable enough, and there's no reason to just like aim for such purity when you can't get usability. I actually feel that privacy is a bigger problem right now than, let's say, blockchain space on the blockchain right now. I don't think that's a really big problem.
Yeah, that's it. Actually, I was gonna ask about that because, like, in the case of Zcash, like the usage of shielded transactions is like less than 10%. So
yes, very low.
We start to feel like, are people like caring about privacy, right? I mean, why do you think this is the case? And in this situation, like, how can we appeal these privacy features to actual users?
Right. I think this is actually a very, very interesting use case, and what we're doing at Firo is also quite different. So the problem, like, with Dash, with Zcash, they have, or even like currently a Firo, it's an opt-in model where you choose to use the privacy features. And let's face it, most people aren't there to use cryptocurrencies for its intended purpose. It's currently filled a lot with speculation and stuff like that. They can't be bothered. They just think about the promise of the technology, but not so. They don't really care about the usage of it, which is fair enough. But that's the reality.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that it gives a false signal that people do not value privacy. It's just more like people don't care right now. But because of people not caring right now, it affects the privacy of everyone else. Because when only a few people are using it, then your pool of potential people are very small, right? If everyone's using it, or like you force everyone to use it, then it becomes like, well, everyone's equal. You can't say that because I use these privacy features, I'm now dodgy, right? It's more like whether I'm dodgy or not, I'm using a privacy feature, right? It's kind of like with like HTTPS, or like when we surf the web, we use HTTPS regardless of whether we like it or not, right? So I think that the way we are approaching it right now, because we are facing in new technology, is that we are going to make privacy by default. That means kind of like Monero, where when the user is presented with it, they are presented with the private option first. But should they want to opt out, they have to choose to opt. So it's kind of like, instead of opt-in privacy, it's opt-in transparency. It's a bit of a different model. It's not mandatory like in Monero, but it's kind of like in between. And the idea is that we want to encourage make it as easy as possible for people to use the cryptocurrency in a private way, so that our privacy features are used, and it improves the general pool of privacy of the cryptocurrency, rather than making it like a little niche feature that only a few people use. And well, if that's the case, then you shouldn't be using a privacy cryptocurrency. You can use like Bitcoin CoinJoin or Ethereum Tornado Cash or whatever it is. Because if we are all about privacy and making like stuff fungible, then the idea is that we should, at the very least, have the majority of transactions in the private mode. And I'm really interested to see how a transparency opt-in model will work. And obviously, we're pushing eventually to a mandatory way, but currently, exchanges may be a bit hesitant and sort of stuff. So we're doing an a phased approach. I think it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. In general, I think there is a trade-off between like privacy and security and user experience as well. And I think you kind of mentioned that, and to improve like privacy, if you improve like privacy and security aspects, the UX becomes like complicated and somewhat uncomfortable to use. I mean, it's inevitable, right, as of this moment. Right. And I mean, do you think it can be solved? Like, do you think it can be compromised? And I guess like that's our main goal, basically, in eventually. But how do you approach that? And what's your? You
mean like usability versus privacy? I think actually it doesn't really necessarily need to be compromised. I mean, that is kind of why we liked the privacy mandatory model. Like, there's no too transparent or shielded that we need to think about. It's just use your currency like you're using Bitcoin, right? It's just one type of address. And I personally think this is why that people who do care about privacy like Monero. So despite Zcash having technology that is technically maybe more private, or even maybe superior in certain ways, like, even Monero people will say, yeah, a Z to Z transaction is probably the most private that you can get right now with current technology. But because of the way they have implemented it and used it, it's not as private as something like Monero. It's not just about the technology, but the actual implementation. So I do feel that if you are presenting the user like, I'm just sending money, I don't really have to think about it, it's just going to be the private, I don't have to make difficult choices of selecting this or whatnot, worrying. Like, if you have used CoinJoin before, you have to make sure you don't like separate your inputs. It's a freaking nightmare to properly do a CoinJoin that does not leak your information. And we I don't think privacy and usability are at odds with each other. And even scalability, to me, yes, it's less scalable, but not to a point that it would affect usage, right? And that's my personal view on that. Like, the idea is that we are trying not to sacrifice usability to achieve privacy. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And as you mentioned previously, on November 30th, like it was just very recent, Firo announced like a rebranding, entire rebranding from Zcoin to Firo. And first of all, congratulations. Yes. It was a big journey for you, I'm sure. And yes. I'm sure it was a challenging one as well. Can you like walk us through this challenging path of rebranding story, and why did you decide to go with the rebranding and so forth? And also, like, can you also like explain like how you came up with the name Firo? Just curious.
Right, sure. So I guess the idea is that when Zcoin first was created, is that we used the Zcoin protocol, right?
Yes.
And now we're not even using it. We've moved like 2 protocols away from the Zcoin protocol. And Zcoin came from quite humble beginnings. We had like two or three angel investors. They didn't put in a lot of money. We're not talking about millions of dollars. So it's very humble beginnings, right? And we don't have VCs to get us to like shield their bags or like get us on like Coinbase or stuff like that, right? It's all like quite organic and community based. And because of that, we are, first of all, there's always a constant confusion between Zcoin and Zcash.
Yes.
And I mean, even to this day, even like just a few months ago, I was submitting articles about our Lelantus technology to several journalists, and they wrote an article and said that it was a Zcash technology, even though they, right? Yeah.
Oh my God.
And the thing is that not only that, like when people first hear the word Zcoin, because Zcash has, like they're so prominent, they are like, they really own the Z name, until that everyone thinks that if you're a Zcoin, Zcash, or Zcash Classic or whatever, you are a Zcash fork, or you are a clone of Zcash.
Z whatever.
That has really kind of like, we have suffered from that for a very, very long time. And some people say, well, you're chickening out from a fight. I'm like, why do you want to fight on this, right?
Right.
And if you think about it, Zcoin isn't a really good name. First of all, it's named after a protocol that we no longer use, and actually has flaws in it. There was actually a cryptographic flaw in Zcoin, right?
I see.
Secondly, we get confused, and let's look at it realistically. Bitcoin is actually not a very good name, but it's just because that it's acquired that it is not a good name. That people still think of it. A lot of people still think of it as like toy money, right? It's like, oh, give me like some bitcoins or stuff like that, and A coin, B coin, C coin, and Z coin, right? I do think that we have to move about that, because our aim is to be currency, like a real currency. So we have to act and sound like currency, right? Have you ever heard like, Korean coin, right? It's the like the euro, lira, peso. They are easy to say.
Yeah.
They're not attracting information. Anyone can pronounce it. And we felt that Firo really sounds like money, like sending 1 Firo, 2 Firo, 3 Firo, rather than 1 Zcoin, 2 Zcoin, 3 Zcoin. There were even several proposals to say, why don't you call it something cool like Lelantus, like your privacy protocol? And, well, I send you 1 Lelantus, 2 Lelantus, 2 Lilas, 3 Lilas, right? And the thing is that you should not be naming your coin after your protocol, because protocols change.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
And you don't want to be tied to a protocol. And we were thinking that we need this to have an identity just for the coin itself. Now, on top of that, we kind of like were the pioneers of the burn and redeem mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why Firo is like the burning, the fire Firo, you know, and that's why it's the red color and stuff like that. And we also wanted to move away from, we used like a dark, like black and green thing, which kind of looks like Matrix. And we don't want to make it seem like privacy is for hackers or for criminals and stuff like that. So we really wanted to say, look, this is just money. This is private, financial privacy. We want to present a very like clean look, no traces of like illicit use or whatnot. And we want to sound like currency, and we don't want to be confused with Zcash anymore. And I think these are really good reasons to do so. And obviously, not everyone's going to be happy. Some people are emotionally attached to the Zcoin. I'm also very attached to the Zcoin name, but I'm thinking to myself, look, we really need, like, it's going to hurt short-term pain for long-term gain. That's what I personally feel. And I don't want, when the next wave of cryptocurrency adoption comes along, I don't want to be judged just because of my name, Zcoin, that people think immediately that we are Zcash for, or they were just some play money. We want to be like, Firo is a currency with its own technological innovations, and it stands on its own right. And that's kind of our, reasoning on doing this rebrand. Yeah.
That's a very reasonable reasoning, and you're looking at the longer term, which I think definitely should be it's a great reason to do that, and I do also like the fact that you're trying to make like this privacy, I guess, coins like more of a bright, not dark feature. Yes. Like feels like there's this. I was just gonna say, like, there's this misconception that people have about privacy coins, like, oh, it's dark, it's illegal, and all this kind of like negative. They have this negative connotation.
Right.
What's your view on that? Like, why did this come about? And do you think it can be solved in a way? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Because there's always this misconception that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, and therefore, like, if you're nothing to hide, why do you bother with privacy, right? And that's a very, actually who said that? Like, who said that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear? It was Joseph Goebbels, one of the Nazi. So it's like you have to realize that this sort of idea that it's not about wanting to hide something, is the ability to choose what to reveal to the world, right? Like you don't. Can you imagine if you had all your thoughts publicly for everyone to read? You would say that is a breach of my privacy. Or if someone could read all my emails, or read all my messages, that is not that we necessarily have anything to hide. It's just that something that we may not be comfortable with sharing with the world. There is that self, and there is that public face. And similarly, like with finances, I think that's even more private. Like, you don't want people to be judged by how much they have, or suddenly, can you imagine, like, in the world where everyone uses cryptocurrencies, like, oh, you look like you're a poor guy, we give you like shit treatment, right? And oh wow, look, you have like a big amount here, I'm going to treat you differently. That's the thing. There doesn't need to be any that distinguishing features of, like, it's not that I want to hide my money, it's just that I don't want to be put at risk. I don't want people to know about my life. It's not about hiding stuff. It's about, again, the ability to choose. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, obviously, privacy coins even Bitcoin, right? When it was taught to be anonymous, the first use cases were like, the Silk Road, the darknet markets, because, it's a natural trend, right? If I want to hide illicit activity, I want to use private stuff. Mm-hmm. And it didn't help that some of the early privacy coins, including Monero, they were championing its use on stuff like darknet markets or drug markets and stuff like that, even though the real usage was actually very, very low. but they just thought, whoa, like, yeah, because hackers use us, we must be good. And I mean, it's understandable, but it is probably, in retrospect, that wouldn't have been a very good choice. Now, if you take a look also at the naming of early privacy coins, okay, Monero's fine, but Dash used to be called Dark Coin, right?
Oh yes.
Right. Yep.
Yes.
And and what else? Then there was this new coin that McAfee wanted to promote. It was called Ghost, right? And then this other privacy coin called Veil. It's like, why you're making it, and you say like, even when you Google like privacy, you will see someone with a mask, or like even like incognito mode, like that's that little mask thing, as if like you're trying to hide, like it's a dirty thing that you're trying to do. And I do think that we should view it as like, no, this is like me protecting my fundamental right to keep certain things from the world private, and that's what we're trying to change. And that's why we've like avoided all this type of like dark sand. Like it used to be like private sand used to be called dark sand in Dash, and all these negative dark connotations, because we already get enough prep for being a privacy coin. We don't need to add to that narrative that it is used for illegal activity, because the actual reports, like the RAND report, and even there was this study that was conducted by one of the risk assessment for terrorist funding, and they said like the use of cryptocurrencies or even private cryptocurrencies is very low in terms of illicit or terrorist funding, and the threat of it is actually not very high. You don't need to ban it. The best way to deal with it is through existing frameworks, like more stringent AML KYC procedures, which are not against privacy coins. You can have AML KYC procedures at the exchange level and still use a privacy coin. And I guess, yeah, I mean that's something that we're going to talk about later, I suppose, with the recent delistings.
That was exactly my next question. So in South Korea, right, there are these like big exchanges, and I was talking to certain exchanges, and they were just suddenly delisting all the privacy coins without any solid reason, to be honest. It was kind of like they were just concerned about regulations or potential illegal activities. I don't know, but it was very vague reasoning.
Yes.
Is this the common response from other exchanges as well, like not only from Korea? And what's your opinion on these recent series of bans?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Korea actually said that all privacy coins will be banned in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. I think they recently came up with some guideline on that. But if you take a look, like, of course, all of them will cite like, oh yeah, we're worried about AML, anti-money laundering, KYC, terrorist funding, and therefore we're banning privacy coins and stuff like that. And actually, if you take a look at the actual research, it's more than 90% of all these dark activities happens on Bitcoin. So why are you singling? And if you want to single out Bitcoin, how about fiat? Right, like trillions of dollars go through Citibank and all these huge banks, and what has happened to them? Nothing, right? They're still operating. No one went to jail, or very few people went to jail. But okay, let's not talk about the double standards here. I mean, that is a thing, but the idea is that there is nothing under regulation that says you have to ban privacy coins. And South Korea in particular cited the FATF travel rule and the guidelines, the Financial Action Task Force guidelines. Now, it's really silly because the FATF explicitly says, well, I mean, the FATF travel rule applies to cash, which is private by nature. Right? Yes. Why should it be different with privacy coins, right? And all that the travel rule requires is that when one VAPS, like virtual asset or something, is a VAPS, virtual asset service provider, which means exchanges, custodial wallets. When they're transferring from one VAPS to another VAPS, they need to give sender details, like who is sending this money to, where's this money from? These are the same rules that happens with cash or funds that are transferred in banks. It's not like a particular rule to deal with cryptocurrencies. It's just a rule that's been extended to cryptocurrencies. Now, if exchanges are already doing AML and KYC, they know who you are,
Mm-hmm.
So whether your transaction to the other VAS is private or not, it doesn't matter because the exchange knows who you are, because they're transferring on behalf of you. So why is there a requirement for, there's no difference in the treatment of privacy cryptocurrencies and normal currencies, right? And if anything, just require better AML and KYC, like, at the registration point, make sure that this person identifies himself. When he deposits a large amount of money, ask him where it comes from. These are not, you can do that with Bitcoin, you can do that with cryptocurrencies. The problem is there has been a lot of lobbyists, especially from blockchain analysis company like Chainalysis, CipherTrace, and all these other people, who are promoting the view that if you cannot do blockchain analysis to find potential like red flags, and actually like blockchain analysis is a probability game. It's not going to catch all, it may not even catch, like, it's just like, oh yeah, it's really obvious that it came from Silk Road, then I'm going to flag it, right? Or if it's on some kind of sanction list. You still can do that with privacy coins. You can still, like, find, like, blacklisted addresses that not to accept money from. There's no issue with that. The only thing that you're lacking is that you may not be able to do effective on-chain analysis. But that doesn't prevent you from have all these other controls, the AML, KYC, risk-based approach, tiered approach based on amounts, and there's really nothing. But the problem is that exchanges, when they're facing these regulators, they're like, am I going to fight the regulator and challenge and perhaps at the risk of my business? Or should I just delist them and be done with it?
Right.
And unfortunately, most of the exchanges, especially the smaller ones, they're just like, I think it's easier to just delist.
Yeah.
And even in Australia, where there was, I think it was Chainalysis that basically partnered with all these exchanges, and they were suddenly told to delist all privacy coins as well. So they delisted us and a bunch of other privacy coins, again, on this same thing. And there's this really like, well, okay, I mean, like, so we have evidence that privacy coins aren't really used for illicit activity. There are ways to comply with the FATF travel route. There are ways to comply with AML KYC. The only thing that we do not comply, which is not a requirement, is just a single way to analyze, is blockchain analysis. So because of this like growing misconception that blockchain analysis is the only way to do it, which is actually really most exchanges, like, we have it without actually really assessing how effective it is. It's just more like tick a box, right? And this is why privacy coins are being banned. And even in Japan, I mean, your neighbor, they banned privacy coins because of their coin check hack. I think it was 500 million US dollars worth of NEM was hacked.
Yes.
And again, NEM has no privacy features whatsoever. None. And none of the proceeds was laundered or changed into privacy coins per se.
Yeah.
The main reason why that hack happened was because the exchange had weak security. And instead of going after the exchange or, like, cracking down and making sure the security protocols, they decided, let's just ban privacy coins because they're bad. And I'm like, how does that make sense? Right. It doesn't. Privacy coins had no role in this, but, because basically, I guess the regulator got caught, like, red-faced that they approved this exchange, right? And they needed to be seen as doing something. And this has been the continuous case. So I feel that a lot of these delistings actually are more form over substance. Because, yes, although we call ourselves a privacy coin, what's the difference when they say, okay, Ethereum has Tornado Cash, Bitcoin has CoinJoin, it's opt-in privacy. Then why is Zcash and Dash delisted, right? They are just privacy mechanisms that you can use. So what is it? Just a marketing thing, right? And there have been coins that have been delisted that don't even have privacy features, like something like Verge, where they just say they are a privacy coin, but they have no privacy features whatsoever. So it's more about the branding.
Yeah.
I'm banning you because of the branding. Or even Komodo, which removed their privacy function because they didn't want to be delisted. They still got delisted anyway because they used to promote privacy features. Or even Dash. Dash isn't a privacy coin right now. The privacy that it provides is maybe worse than Bitcoin, and yet it's delisted. So it is, again, the form over the substance. And that's why I feel that the real reason is not about fighting anti-money laundering or whatnot. It's first of all regulators want to be seen as doing something. And privacy coins are an easy scapegoat, especially when, you have some news like, oh, such and such hacker used Monero. Well, yeah, we hear the news, but it's actually a very, very small percentage, right?
Yeah.
And then then you have this blockchain analysis companies that you need blockchain analysis. If you can't do that, then it's too risky for you. So there's all a combination of these factors that had made privacy coins as kind of like taboo.
Yeah. That's very unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate. Yeah.
It's very unfortunate, and it was probably the easy target for the regulators or exchanges or whatnot. And it just breaks my heart. But let's look in a brighter light. As you know, I saw this article. I mean, I saw this content where Zcoin, previously was Zcoin, was collaborating with the government, like the elections. And
the Thai Democrat Party, yeah.
Yeah, the Thai Democratic Party. Can you tell us more about that, that collaboration and how that happened and how it was useful? Yeah, I'm very curious about that one.
So that one's very interesting because the Thai Democratic Party was traditionally one of the more stronger parties. Now they're not as strong as they used to be. And the guy that kind of was championing this initiative was Abhisit, who was a previous Thai prime minister. So he has actually been the prime minister of Thailand before. And what had happened was the Thai Democrat Party, traditionally how it selected its leader was a bunch of the top tier people. Like, okay, you're the leader of the Thai Democrat Party. The individual members did not have actually any say. Mm-hmm. Now, Abhisit, he's Western educated and stuff like that. Well, when you compare to someone like the Thaksin party, they're more like, more down to the earth like people. So people see Abhisit as someone as a aristocrat, and there were many concerns that he may not have the support of his party to represent as the Thai Democrat Party leader. Mm-hmm. And therefore he wanted to say, well, I want the Thai Democrat Party members to be individually allowed to express their preference as to who should be the Thai Democrat Party leader, to first of all, get his mandate so that he can lead the party, and also also to see, well, does he have support or not? And obviously, the registered base of the Thai Democrat Party is very large. It's actually 2.5 million or more people.
Wow.
So to be able to run an election like that would be very costly, right?
Yeah.
So obviously they said, well, why don't we do e-voting, right? And everyone said, okay, let's do e-voting. But halfway through the implementation, the other candidates for the challengers for the Thai Democrat Party leader post started saying, well, how can I trust this system? Because if it's an electronic thing, if you control the server, can't you just change the votes? And how can I be certain that this is going to be not tampered with, right? And then someone said, well, why don't you just use the blockchain where you can post the votes, and the blockchain is a public blockchain. It's not controlled by any single person. It's actually like a decentralized infrastructure, right? Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, okay, yeah, we are okay with that. And so Zcoin was actually brought in at a very late stage to say, right, we are moving this e-voting system onto the blockchain, and we're going to record the votes on the blockchain. Of course, encrypt them, but it serves as a ledger that is not controlled by anybody, and that people can verify that the vote has been properly casted. So we were brought in, not only to use our blockchain, but also to help to like we split the keys among the different stakeholders so that no one party can just decrypt and see who voted who. So we had some element of voter privacy. The identity was actually separated from the votes themselves, and also that the tabulation of the votes. Pormin, our founder, also assisted with that process to make sure that everyone brought their keys together, and the encryption and the tabulation of the results, which was uncontested. So I think it was a really interesting use case. I don't think there has been a election of that magnitude ever since. On that particular election, more than 127,000 votes were cast on our blockchain. So I don't think anything has come close to doing that. And yeah, it's the first blockchain election of its kind. We don't pretend that it's perfect. There are many ways to improve the system, but I guess it serves as a good proof of concept that there are certain scenarios, especially here where the stakeholders did not trust each other, a public blockchain can be used to do voting.
Wow, so it's actual use case, and I think it should be definitely highlighted, especially with what's happening in the US right now.
Yes.
It's definitely appropriate use case. Wow, that's super interesting.
One of the problems is that we also have been very careful to say that we aren't like, oh yeah, we are blockchain voting experts, because blockchain is only one component, which is the storage of the votes, right? Mm-hmm. There are many, many elements of how do I make sure the identity, the code, the mobile apps, and all this verification stuff. And we're not experts at every single component. We were just concerned with the blockchain implementation side. There are other companies that maybe focus on more end-to-end sort of stuff. And I do think that many people just think that, oh yeah, blockchain elections are going to solve everything, when actually it doesn't. Like, it's only one component. There are many other aspects of e-voting that are very difficult to solve, and therefore we should tread lightly. And blockchain isn't the solution to everything. I mean, in many cases you don't need a blockchain for it, but in this particular scenario, it was useful. Yeah.
I believe I saw the tweet storm related to this this argument. That was quite interesting. So there was a lot of refuting arguments as well. And
right. Yes.
I saw that. Yeah, this is all super interesting. We're hitting like near the end of the interview, but like, what do you see as the upcoming milestones for the project in 2021? And you just recently hit a big milestone. But what's going to happen next?
Right. I mean, of course, the Lelantus privacy protocol is our first foray, especially moving into a privacy by default model and offering like a really high level of privacy that, in a practical sense, hasn't really been offered by other cryptocurrencies. Like, yeah, Zcash may have the highest technical privacy, but because of the way they implement it for certain reasons, they never do it. So we hope to be like the most practical private coin there. And there are certain improvements that we're doing, like when we talk about the burn and redeem in Q1 or maybe Q2 next year, we don't even need to redeem. I can pass that right to redeem to you. That means like I don't have to redeem the coins. I can just pass it right to redeem to you, even partially, and that serves as almost like a Z2C transaction, or even better, right? There are also other elements that we really, we feel that we focus a lot on the theory, the technology and stuff, but I really want to kind of focus on the usability. So that means like fast-sync mobile wallets, fast-sync, desktop wallets that you can sync in a couple of seconds rather than, waiting for hours for the thing to sync without relying on trusted infrastructure. That's something that we're really looking forward to. And because Firo is GPU mineable coin, and the good thing about GPU mining is that it's fair, right? Like most people have a GPU, you can mine it. I don't need specialist hardware. It's not monopolized by one or two companies that can produce this hardware, right?
Yeah.
Because people don't realize that why would the mining company want to sell you money-making machines when they could use it to print money for themselves? So it's like, yeah, I mean, they would maybe sell a little bit to get some cash flow, but they could also mine with it. And that is the case with many, especially the smaller ASIC manufacturers. They just build it for themselves and maybe some select customers. And we feel that that's bad for the decentralized and distribution of the currency. But it also means that because GPUs are not loyal to your coin, right? Because if I, let's say 51% attack the coin, I destroy the coin, I still have a graphics card, I still can mine other coins, I can still play games. It doesn't lose its value. Well, with ASICs, if I attack Bitcoin, well, then what's the point of my machine, right? Yeah, so that's a trade-off. And because of that, we have seen many 51% attacks on GPU mineable coins. Like Green recently suffered a 51% attack. Yes. Beam also suffered a 51% attack. ETC also suffered a 51% attack, if I'm not mistaken. And especially for chains, smaller chains like ourselves, proof of work alone doesn't offer sufficient security. But we still want that distribution element of proof of work. So what we are doing now is using one additional incentivized node infrastructure to act as an additional security layer so that it will prevent 51% attacks by having what we call the master nodes to also additionally verify that they also agree with it. So what that means is something we call chain locks. That means it will not allow conflicting double spend transactions. It would mean almost instant finality, like in a couple of seconds. And we hope to be like, the first coin that has instant, actually private transactions, right? Not just like fake privacy. So we're really excited about this. So I would say that 2021 is, yes, there are improvements in privacy, but we're really going to be focused about usability and that's our like main goal in the next year. We also have actually an additional layer called the Elysium tokenization layer, and the idea is that it is not easy to build private coins, right? There's so many things that you need to do, and the idea is that we are trying to think of ways to bridge other assets from other chains into our thing to be able to say, okay, like let's say you have USDT or DAI, right? And you can't really, well, you can use Tornado Cash and it's like really expensive and stuff like that. Why don't you can sort of bridge it into like the Firo ecosystem, have like a Firo version of USDT. We were not issuing it, it's just like a bridge. You can transact privately with it, you can do all sorts of stuff with it, and anytime you can convert it back. We think that's potentially very interesting. We don't know where it would take us, but I do think it's an interesting idea to explore. And we are very, although some other chains kind of scoff at DeFi and say like it's all about a lot of money games and Ponzi scams, we do think that a lot of innovation in DeFi space, the innovation is real. Like stuff like automated market makers, usable DEXs, all these sort of liquidity provisions are or like decentralized loans are ways to increase the usability of our coin. And although we are not interested on replicating that on our chain, because that's just like, increases attack vectors and there's just so much work to do. It's better to go to something like Ethereum, where all things are happening. If we can have trustless bridges between our layer one chain with the Ethereum chain, and we've already started one of the our first wrapped Firo product that is actually already live on Ethereum right now. And we are looking for more trustless bridges such as like Ren protocol, which we are part of the Ren Alliance. So once we do that, we see ourselves not as just like a coin that just exists on its own, but like we see ourselves as a cryptocurrencies that exists in a much larger space. We do what we do the best, but we can bridge into other chains to do other stuff that make it useful, rather than trying to do everything in one chain and not being very good at anything, you know. So I think that's a kind of the approach that we're taking.
I think your approach is the wiser approach,
We'll
in my opinion. Yes, I won't say no more. But yeah, thank you so much for the insight. And you know, if they want to reach you or the team, and you know, I think in 2021, right, in COVID, even though I think COVID will probably continue in 2021, but I think you know, are you planning to like rank up your, you know, marketing efforts and spreading out Firo and
yeah, I mean, if people can stop banning us, right? Like, like I do think that. I mean, right now we are just trying to make sure that, you know, what we are trying to do right now is to make sure that we are as hard to stop as possible. We are not against regulation, but we realize that if you just follow regulation, you will also never get anywhere. So like, for example, like if Satoshi went to the regulators and said, hi, I want to create Bitcoin, it would have never taken off, right?
No.
Like, right? You create it, you make it adopted, you build ways to make it hard to stop, and then regulation will regulate around it and then address the concerns that they have. And I mean, that's even like the model that Airbnb and Uber did, right? Like,
yes,
grow first and think later. And that's why we're really looking at ways, okay, like decentralized exchanges and all this other stuff to combat. While we are still like, you know, trying to engage the regulators, we're also trying to tell them, if you block us, it's also going to be kind of futile, because you're just actually going to lose more control, because if everything just goes out of your purview, rather than if it's with existing regulated exchanges, you can still control, do AML KYC. If you ban us, it just goes all right into decentralized exchanges and stuff. And where's your control then? So yeah, so you know, we've been also like, you know, trying to organize community events, like more fun stuff like game night and stuff like that. I mean, it's small efforts, but we want people to feel more like a family rather than just as investors of the project. And I think that's important, especially when you think about what the original cryptocurrency movement was about. I think now it's too much about the price. Even Bitcoiners are like, they talk more about how much money they're going to make, or it's going to be $100,000 rather than, you know, about what it's what it's supposed to stand for. Or they talk about privacy or unseizability without really understanding what it all means. It's all just a complicated shield, right?
Yes, yes, for
but
sure.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to find out about us, we have a website at Firo.org, and all our community links are there. We are really active on Telegram and Discord. So yeah, I mean, feel free to drop by. We have community meetings once a month. So if you want to chip in and, like, you know, weigh your opinions on the direction of Firo should go, you're welcome to join. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I checked out all the website and, you know, the channels, and they seem very active. And I think there's like a ton of resources on the website itself. Like, it's just really well organized. And yeah, so I had a lot of fun like browsing into that. But yeah, and also like just to add, like there's this, you know, group, privacy focused research group in Korea, as you know about, but you know, they are very interested in the project, and you know, they have high respect for what you're building. So yeah, I mean, I really think, you know, that 2021 will bring more exposure and more, I guess, importance on privacy, and I'll also keep my eyes on your project as well. Thank you so much for this long interview, and you know, hope for the best, and hope your hand heals soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you.